audio and I'm rolling video. Rob, you're good to go anytime.
Okay, I'm just going to start with just a couple of simple questions. So, where are you living now?
I moved to Ventura in 1991, and I'm still here. I love it here.
And what brought you to Ventura?
The same thing that drew me to swing dancing, Ventura. It's kind of it's a little bit of a flashback of a town, just enough, but it's still modern enough to live in. But it definitely takes you back to a simpler time, just like the dance does.
Okay, if you were going to tell me in a very short statement about you as to what swing dancing means to you, how would you say that?
Myself, like many people, were attracted to swing.
Remember, do it in terms.
In terms of I start the conversation.
Starting the conversation.
Okay.
You normally say myself.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
One of the reasons I started swing dancing was a desire to common.
What I want you to do is keep looking at me. I mean, as you're thinking, that's
Yes.
fine, but don't look over toward the camera.
Okay.
Don't look over in that direction. Don't look over.
I'm gonna readjust my bum then.
Okay.
Because my bum is adjusted for over there. Hang on.
Okay.
That way, when I sit up, my head will go this way and not that way.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you can just as soon as he says that shadow out of your face. Okay. Is that all right? So again, tell me a little bit in your own words, short statement, what swing dancing means to you.
Swing dancing brings you together. It brings you to a simple time where the roles are defined. One person follows, one person leads, and there's only three things that matter, and it's the music, the dance floor, and your partner. And you just forget everything else while the song is playing.
That sounds great. Now, in swing dancing, I've noticed, and particularly because you have all this wardrobe and stuff, is that the wardrobe is kind of unique. Tell me a little bit about it.
For many people who swing dance, the vintage lifestyle, the vintage clothing, it's all part of the preservation of what they love. So they want to dress, they want to dress the dance, they want to dance the dance, they'll live the dance, their home, their car, everything. Some people will take it to that extreme, but it's all about that preservation. Some dances are all about moving forward, always changing it. Lindy Hop is unique in the sense that it's about preserving a time in history, and also, you might be interested to know, it's the only true American dance. Only.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. Now, with the vintage clothing, I know that that's been a big deal for you. You collected it for quite a while, correct?
My great-grandmother owned a clothing store in the 30s, 40s, and 50s across the street from the phone company in Los Angeles, and she kept a lot of it because she was a wee bit of a hoarder. Since I was a little girl, she started giving me those clothes. So I started collecting vintage clothing when I was just in elementary school. By the time I hit high school, I was already wearing vintage clothing on a regular basis. I bought my first modern pieces of clothing when I was in my 30s.
So, since you've been doing this for such a long time, did the interest in the dancing come before the clothing, or the clothing before the dancing?
I would say the clothing was before the dancing, the clothing and the romance of the clothing. And I did mix it up with a lot of kind of punky stuff in the 80s, but as the 90s came in, I became much more focused on the preservation of all of it. I became more interested in watching films, and I found there were a lot of people just like me. We were obsessively watching films. I was already at that point learned my eras of vintage clothing, and I wanted my social activities to match what I was wearing, so I learned all the dances from the 20s to the 50s and which outfits should be worn while performing those dances. And I found other people that were like-minded, and this was before YouTube, so we would sit and watch VHS tapes for hours looking for snippets of American swing dancing, and then we would try to record them off the TV, try to make copies, share them with each other, and then learn the dances from breaking them down. And eventually we started finding the old timers that are actually in those movies. We started finding them, and they started teaching us the dance they're doing. And it just really took off.
That sounds really interesting. Now, as you were looking at this, obviously something that sounds very important is authenticity. How do you deal with the authenticity of the wardrobe?
Well, there's this weird line that you have to try to ride when you're dressing for swing dancing. You want to be authentic and you want to match the dance that you're doing, but you also need to be comfortable enough to perform those dances. And not all vintage clothing is designed for comfort. And also, it's become much more scarce now. So you also have to ask yourself, what kind of dance am I going to do? How long am I going to be doing it? And can this dress hold up to this dance? Because I used to be, I didn't care. I would just shred clothes up on a weekly basis, and I had so much of it, and it was so easy to find. But it's harder to find now, so we're much more careful about what we wear and when we wear it. And we've started making reproductions of our outfits. Instead of wearing the vintage all the time, we started making reproductions.
Well, it would seem when you talk about shredding it up, and there would probably be a problem with the age of some of the clothing.
Yes, some of the clothing is made out of silk, and so some of the silk weaves, they'll fall apart pretty quickly. And yeah, exactly, an age. And it's amazing. You don't realize it if you've ever put anything in the closet after you've worn it and you didn't take it to the dry cleaners first. And when you put it away, it looked fine. It's like, oh, I barely wore it. But if you go back into the closet so many months later, you'll see stains, maybe under the armpits and such. You thought it was no big deal that you didn't sweat in it, but you did. Well, they did the same thing back then, and all of those proteins and acids, they'll break down the clothing.
Okay, so it seems like this is obviously part of your life, and this is important to you. But as you grow older, what do you see as you age? Is this going to be something that you're going to keep doing until the day you die?
Yeah, it's funny, when I started swing dancing, I was just doing it for myself. And when I first started learning it in a more formal way, it was still for myself. I just wanted to learn to do it the way it was really done. Especially at the time, I did everything else vintage. Why don't I dance exactly the way it was done, to the right songs at the right moment? And falling into teaching and competing was truly an accident, which shows you that if you love something, other people can see that, and it can end up taking you places. I didn't imagine myself doing it as aggressively as I still am. And what really surprises me is that although the trendiness of swing isn't the same as it was in the 90s, worldwide, swing dancing is bigger than it was when it first originally started in the 40s. It is bigger now than ever around the world.
Okay, I think that's great. I think we have plenty for short.
You want to, let's do this last line at the same, can you repeat the line about this is bigger now than the end of the world? I just want to have a touch on
Okay.
Okay, hold on. All right, go ahead.
Swing dancing is bigger now around the world than it ever was. It's bigger now than it was when it first came out in the 40s, and it's held out for a longer duration. The actual swing era is so short and was so quick. The second coming of swing has lasted longer.
That was great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay,
Very good.
so let's hang out here, guys. I'm gonna stop.